Welcome to Rehab Remix, Reimagining Boundaries, the podcast that explores the future of orthopedic rehab within the construct of clinical innovation and connected health. I'm Rohit Nayak, co-founder of Band Connect, your host for this segment. Our goals through these discussions is to energize all of you to play a role in helping us address the many challenges we all face in physical therapy and orthopedic rehab as patients, clinicians, or clinic leaders. Today, it is my privilege to introduce Stephen Kinsley, Senior Vice President of Payer Strategy at Ivy Rehab. Ivy Rehab is a growing network of outpatient clinics offering physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and ABA services to both children and adults. My sense is most of you listening in know Ivy by now. Ivy operates over 750 clinics across 18 states. Stephen joined Ivy Rehab from SCA Health, a division of Optum, where he spent over 19 years as the executive leader of payer engagement and strategy, and his final 2 years as president of the growth office. Interestingly, I first connected with Stephen during his role as a mentor at Techstars over 3 years ago, Stephen.
Wow.
His background in the business of orthopedics, particularly around value-based care, was interesting to us, but I don't think either side knew he would end up at a nationally recognized PT. So it's a small world and keeps getting smaller, as I like to say. I could go on, but in his current role, he's all about defining and delivering on the value of PT rehab, which makes him an ideal guest for this rehab segment. Stephen, welcome and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Rohit. Glad I'm here.
I'd like to start by getting your perspective on your professional journey. What brought you to where you are, all the many years that you spent engaging with provider organizations and beyond at SCA Health?
Yeah, it's a great question, and interesting enough, if you go all the way back to being relatively fresh out of college, I actually worked for a regional physical therapy organization who eventually ended up getting acquired by Kessler Rehab, which eventually got acquired by Select Medical. So I guess I could say I started in this space and then took a gap and spent a big chunk of my professional career with SCA Health, and then made my way back here. Ivy is a super organization with a tremendous culture. It's very, very aggressive in our growth and what we feel we can offer in this space. So it was a tremendous opportunity to stretch myself and be a part of something that I consider is really special.
Awesome. I had forgotten about your early days there, so thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it is a full circle for you, isn't it?
It is. It is.
That's incredible. That's incredible. It's amazing how we all connect. So, a very topical question for you, just given where you've lived. How do payers look at PT rehab today? I know it's a very broad question, but it'll be great to get your perspective.
Yeah, it is broad, and I think, overarching, I think payers look positively at all providers. Right? It is important if you think of the health plans and their employer groups, right? We've got to have the full gamut of healthcare services, if you will. So there's value in whether you're a tertiary hospital or a small physical or occupational therapy center. So they definitely lean in, they see the value, and I believe that the payers want to engage more in a conversation with what you offer and the value it will bring to their members. Whereas if you go back to when I first started way back, it was very transactional. It was, we want to pay you this, you wanted to get this, and you kind of went back and forth for a while. But now there's more of a dialogue of where you are, where are you growing. The health plans continue to grow. They have needs too. And so we can help the members in their healthcare in this space. And is there a way that we could then provide something back to them, to the employer group? So I think overall it's favorable. But I'd be a fool if I didn't say that it's hard. I mean, we come from different spaces. We both want the same thing, but we kind of come from different spaces. But overall, very favorable in their view of our space.
So what about, I know payers is also a broad term in itself, different types of payers. Any nuances between them that you'd like to share one way or the other?
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of nuances, right? If you can start in the commercial space where you basically have your self-insured and fully insured. Self-insured, the employer groups are responsible for the overall medical expense, and so that'll always waver a little bit. The pressures from the employers. If you think of what's happened to health plans over the years, there's a lot of pressure from employer groups to make sure that their cost of care is staying down, because then that potentially can keep the premiums down. But they still want to offer the full suite of healthcare services to their workforce. So it's very important. The government working in the Medicare space, it's slightly different, whereas individual health plans can have varying reimbursement methodologies. For the most part, CMS has a published fee schedule that is released in the summer of each year. There's a comment period. It's locked down in Q4 and starts in January of the following year. So it's a little more defined. And then you got the work comp space, which is completely different, but extremely valuable to our space in the physical and occupational therapy world, where you just have that's driven by the employer. It's a little different. It's not a benefit, right? It's entitlement when you work for someone to get you healthy. So that's a little different. You're dealing more with nurse case managers and case adjusters, and I think everyone's motivated to get healthy, but you can think of the three classifications of people. You got your seniors, you got your everyday workforce, and the individuals that are unfortunate to get injured on the job. And so the motivation varies, and they can cross over, but there is slight variations, but I wouldn't call it anything crazy.
It's fascinating to listen to you because I haven't spent too many years in that space, and just looking at how you describe your various segments and the organizations, I find very educational every time I talk to you. So thank you for that again.
Thank you.
So transitioning on, sort of orienting towards this term that I've been using a lot called hybrid rehab. Hopefully it's a movement within organizations as well. At Band Connect, we like to say that our primary role is to add objective data to existing processes to provide, progression information around rehab care from a patient perspective. We put that under the moniker of hybrid rehab because that's the sort of the flag that we are carrying. It's not just about home exercise therapy. It's not just about RTM reimbursement either, but it's that holistic orientation about driving clinician-patient engagement for hopefully better outcomes, which we're seeing. What are your thoughts about hybrid rehab, the role in the industry, and then, sort of sticking to this whole payer dimension as well? Love to hear how your conversations, if any, with the payers are going around this particular term. Is it a part of the vocabulary at all?
I start with the end. It absolutely is a part of the vocabulary. I mean, if you think about the beginning and me saying there's a greater dialogue with the health plans / payers, this hybrid rehab, remote therapeutic monitoring, I think it's extremely important. I'm just an N of one when I say this, but I feel that people are becoming much more engaged and involved in their care. And I think a lot of that has to do just with as the world changes, as technology comes out, they want to know what's happening. And honestly, just coming into physical therapy twice a week or 3 times a week, I mean, that's great, but you're compliant when you're there. And we all get lazy when we're not there. I'll raise my hand, right? I'll raise my hand. You get physical therapy, they put you on a plan, they say, hey, make sure you do exercises at home or make sure you whatever. And you don't do it. You get lazy. But having this hybrid care and having the technology where when you are doing it, it makes it back to the physical therapist, because it's very easy to walk into your physical therapist and say, to get you exercises? Yeah, I did my exercises, right? But actually having something tangible and measurable and showing progress. And I think this isn't an absolute, but you can take that back to the health plans. And what does that show? That shows potentially greater member satisfaction, greater employee satisfaction, so they're happier at work. What's that show? It shows that potentially lowering the cost of care. There's not re-injuries. I mean, there's a lot of things that the payers can do. The data that they have is so unbelievably robust that they can really dive deep and you see it. If you think of some of the large health plans, and we all know who they are, I mean, when you have hundreds and hundreds of millions of lives and you lower costs by 1%, that's a big dollar. And so they really are leaning into this type of therapy.
So I'm switching over into this favorite topic, which I've talked to you at length before, around value-based care.
Yeah.
It seems to be very little of it in PT rehab. Is that going to change anytime soon? Do you see?
Yeah.
What do your team tell you?
I mean, I'd love to see it change. Right? I mean, personally, I think it'd be great. I think there's a space for it. I love the use value-based care because it could just mean so many things to different people. It's just such a very gray term. You could probably ask a handful of us in the space to write a definition down, and we'd probably all have similar points, but there'd be some variation in it. If you think of physical therapy, I think there is a great space for it. If you think specifically to Ivy Rehab and you look at our individual books, you have the commercial book, which obviously is extremely important. Employers are wanting to make sure that their cost is being driven down. So what I find, and this again is just Stephen Kinsley speaking, value-based care, it's the continuum, and it's usually shouldn't be isolated. So it should be, if we're going to enter into some sort of value-based care and is related to the care of the patient, there should probably be some sort of specialist involved, right? I'll use orthopedic for this example because he or she is referring to us and we're managing this patient's care together. So there's got to be, I believe a lot of times, there's got to be some partnerships. You can do it independently. You can say, hey, we average X visits. If we get to this, there is some sort of value. But you still have to work with the physician group or their primary care group. So I think there's a great spot for it. And we don't need to spend time on this, but there's all sorts of varying programs that CMS is putting out that they're really driving some sort of value-based care. You know, they want to make sure everyone's getting it. So it's growing at leaps and bounds in that space. So yeah, and probably, if you think of it more valuable potentially to some of the larger organizations. And that doesn't mean that oh gosh, I heard a stat the other day. I think there's like 30,000 mom and pop physical therapy outfits out there. They can align very closely with an orthopedic group and have a phenomenal value-based care. But when you have some of the larger institutions out there, you're covering more of the spend. So think of any of the other larger ones out there. If they're very concentrated in an area, they control more spend. If you control more spend, you have a greater opportunity to impact more patients and potentially the cost of care.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And thanks for reminding me about the CMS programs. You know, when we started, we made a specific choice to focus on the clinician provider side of the equation, building technology that could enable clinician providers do whatever they do better, because we think they're an important part of the equation. That said, there's a lot of technology that's out there that's focused on pure automation, particularly today with a lot of the technology that's out there. And I think the first iteration of what I saw from CMS was more oriented towards, you know, I guess trialing what happens with the automated care spectrum. At least it feels that way out there. So, you know, obviously from our standpoint, it doesn't seem to hit upon those bigger drivers, which is how do we drive that equation between, at least for post-acute conditions, the notion between the surgeon, the PT rehab specialist, and the patient, you know, the three-way conversation, because it doesn't happen today. No. And that's what we're trying to do. So I really respect, you know, how you described what you just did out there, and certainly hope, and I guess you are as well, looking for a broader manifestation of this whole notion of value-based care from other parts of the industry as well.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think everyone sees its value in the space, and it's different things to different people. It's sitting in my space, it means one thing. Primary care group, I mean, it means, you know, in different alignments and groups. I mean, hospitals can partner with urgent care centers. I mean, there's a whole lot of you know, partnerships, because it really is, if you go down to the root of it, and again, maybe people will think this is a naive statement, but it really is all about the patient's journey through care and making sure he or she, when the time they enter the system to leave, and I'm not talking chronic care management, I'm talking post-acute, that there is some sort of alignment, because ultimately, at all stages of the game, we want that patient / employer to reach their goals. And so there's got to be some sort of light hand holding, if you will.
Yep. So transitioning to, I guess it's not really transitioning, it's in the same theme, talking about remote therapeutic monitoring. You know, when it first came out, a lot of excitement on there. Still is. There's a lot of noise about it as well in the industry today. What we see, one of the trends that we're seeing is there's, at least from the folks that we talk to, is everybody looks at RTM as a source with an additional few dollars, which, coming from where we are, we try to hide that element. We talk about all the other aspects and the value of hybrid rehab even before we touch on the RTM topic, because from our standpoint, it's all about that clinician-patient engagement and driving accountability on all sides. We as patients are terrible to begin with, right? I'm certainly in that camp. But also helping the clinician become less transactional, which they don't have the opportunity to do today.
Yeah.
So.
Look, remote therapeutic monitoring is growing. Yes, the government made some changes, and from my lens, it is an unbelievable way to complement the service that the clinician is providing. It's incredible. You're continuing the engagement, and I think that kind of goes back to my previous comment about their journey through their care. Is you've got to keep them going through their journey, and it's all a part of the healing. Like if I want to be humorous and you want to go on a diet, you don't just diet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? You say, you know what, I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to eat healthy. You do it consistently. Okay, maybe you cheat on a Friday night, but my point being is there's constant interaction, and I think that's the same way in our space. There's got to be continuing interaction, and I truly believe that the patients welcome it. I mean, we all need pushing here and there, right? I mean,
Well,
it's a fact, and times are changing to help with the push, and I think people are a little nervous of the change, but when they see what it can do, they're like, okay, I'm embracing this. So I only see it growing in its value and how it is going to be used by PT clinics and how payers are going to embrace it. So
I'm very bullish on it as well because we're seeing that change, right? That spark occurring, people transitioning towards this and looking at it holistically for what it belongs. And going back to our previous data points, my sense is payers are looking at this as a data point for future movement towards value-based care, right? Because if this in its incremental sense can work, then there's hope
yeah,
towards getting something
I
more.
agree. I agree.
Yeah. So I'm sure you're hearing a lot about this in your current role, right? As you get into operational aspects of your organization as well. It's a pretty universal topic around PT burnout and the heavy focus on productivity, which I think the circumstance drives. See, it's nobody's fault, right? I mean, you're trying to do the best that you can given the
Mm-hmm.
rules of the game, and productivity becomes one of the areas that we can manage and control, at least at the surface. Any specific thoughts from your standpoint? Any specific directions or approaches that you think that we can all sort of follow as an industry?
Yeah, I don't know if I really have approaches. I think it is like you alluded to. It's a measurement. There is a pinch on it. I think it's a culmination of a lot of things. I mean, therapists when I first started, they'd have a bachelor's, maybe a master's. Now a doctorate is almost the norm. That
Right.
is almost they got heavy schooling. That means you usually have heavy schooling costs. So they're more educated. I'm just saying that from a degree perspective. So
Yes.
they're,
And cost.
yeah,
And cost.
absolutely. So now their wages go up, and then you have the margins. The health plans are getting slim. So I just think it's this perfect storm, but it's something you need to be well aware of and managed. I mean, you just got to figure it out. I don't find it any different than any other space when there's a bunch of things going on and there's a culmination of events that you gotta look at that, you gotta manage it, and there's gonna be some ways you manage it better and quicker, I think, than others. But yeah, I don't have any great advice on that.
Yeah. It's just an observation on our part, right? We've begun to identify with the community over the many years that Band Connect has been around, and we've become flag carriers.
Yeah.
And we're again bullish that this whole notion around hybrid rehab, RTM, and all of those things are pieces in the puzzle to help, as I like to say, clinician do what they've been trained for,
Yeah.
right? In a holistic
Hmm.
sense, engaging with the patient to drive what we all want is better
Yep.
outcomes.
Agreed.
So this conversation piece happens all the time these days, and so I'm going to bring it up here as well. Is companies like Hinge, Sword, and several others like that, right, have gained a sense of notoriety. At one point it felt as if, they were trying to disintermediate the PT experience. These days they call themselves physical therapy as well. So how do you look at this as an individual?
You have to look at it. You have to find that there potentially could be value in it. I mean, point solutions from employer groups are growing at leaps and bounds, right? Just not in the physical therapy space. They're growing in multiple healthcare verticals or lanes. And so, and why is that happening? Well, that's happening because a couple reasons. A, employers want to make sure they have great benefits and alternatives because they want to keep a strong workforce. And then if you do offer a lot of these point solutions, there's the potential that they're, like we've been talking about throughout our time together, the continuum of care. Right, it's just not a transactional. I went in and saw, and that's why it's just not physical therapy that these point solutions are coming in, are going into other space. I feel again, you go back to remote therapeutic monitoring, you go back to a lot of other applications and tools. I think they fit in. There is a place for them, and we, along with everyone else, has a lot of conversations with a lot of the varying ones. And so I value that employer groups are bringing them in, and I commend some of them as they continue to. They've evolved their model too, and I think it's tremendous that they've evolved their model. I think it goes to that whole partnership, loosely holding hands things, and so they are a true fit. And look, they're closer to the employer group than we are, right? They're a point solution for an employer group, so you get yourself aligned with them, and there's value in that. Now you're a step closer to the employer group also, and now you have joint outcomes, right? They're doing it from a virtual perspective, you're doing it from an in-house perspective, and you're presenting the sum to the employer group and what that means from a potential decrease in care. I mean, that's value. That's great value right there, because then, something crazy could happen that, I want to work with this group, physical therapy group, because of what they did. They're not an Ivy thing. It's physical therapy group A. This is who I want to work with, because look what they did for all my non-surgical back pain patients. I just made that up. And so I value them. I like having conversations with them. I truly do.
That's great. I totally agree with the premise that there's a place and a role there. The questions are all about what is the intersection, and the way that you presented it in a very constructive manner, I believe, is going to be the pathway, I believe, for equilibrium.
Agree.
To be realized. We may not know exactly what that is. It's certainly headed in that direction. So, we've talked about technology, but not really talked about technology here. And so this is a very broad topic, just to sort of get your perspectives. Where do you see technology making meaningful impact for physical therapy or rehab care today, right? The one thing that I'll talk about the one that I think we all agree makes a lot of sense. There are lots of these automated AI solutions that help scribe the encounter visit. I've been in healthcare tech for decades, and I know that was the holy grail all along, independent of where you are.
Yeah.
So it feels as if that's a natural that seems to be occurring and providing value. Beyond that, what are the areas that you see that could leverage technology in a meaningful way, rather than just point solutions?
Yeah. So I think you kind of alluded to it. I mean, if you think of, and we'll go back to what we said about the pressures and on the physical therapy and the turning of the patients and everything like that, I think technology can help with that. Look, I'm not a clinician, and I sit on the business side, but if you think of some of the tools that are out there, from scribing and things along that line, there's some value there, and I know there's a lot of them out there. So I think that's one way. So if you look, divide it into clinical, and you divide it into business, you've got the clinical side, and I think there's a lot of tremendous platforms out there that can bring value. I think also, and just if you take a look at the business side, and I'll put like EMRs in there, I think as they continue to grow, just how claims can drop, how it's tied to different nodes. I mean, you can communicate quicker to other providers, this overall community. I think there's other types of platforms that can help businesses in how they handle scheduling, how they handle front desk technology, right? There's just a whole lot of things going on. And then if you look at it selfishly, for like my very tiny little vertical here, you're reading agreements, you're doing a lot of stuff. You now have the ability to almost house all this stuff and take a look at where common terminology is and utilize these tools to help manage your agreements substantially better. And it's tremendously valuable. And then the last thing I'd say too, and I think this is important, I think where the tools also help you, and this is a little fluff, but it's a little serious too, is we are always, or providers, not we, excuse me, providers are always selling themselves to the health plan. That's what we do. And so being able to go in with all those points I just referenced in some sort of presentation that is utilized through technology, it's tremendously valuable, right? Back in the day, you'd go in with maybe some spend data, some volume data, and you'd have a conversation. Now you actually can say, look, here's the trend where they went up, here's the trend where it went down. And that's valuable when you're having a conversation as you're selling yourself to why a health plan should work with you.
I think, just as you said, there's certainly a workflow-related, process-oriented automation that's in play today, as you referenced. One of the things that I'm hopeful about is a lot of EMRs are sort of visit-based, episodic, right? And can AI in its current incarnation, or future for that matter, help transition these data elements, silos into something that's more holistic, going back to our conversation, so that it's just not based on a particular segment. One of the other areas that we've been working on is now that we're collecting a lot of data through our platform, and we've been leveraging some of the AI tools out there to provide concepts around clinical decision support, standardizing protocols of care, demonstrating patient progression pathways from a clinician standpoint. Again, these are things that don't exist in clinical care today, and maybe it's a solution looking for a problem, but our general orientation is that, as we're seeing it, is a lot of variability in care treatment protocols around a common premise, but variability in that. And are there elements in there that could be fine-tuned to provide better outcomes? And that's what we're sort of driving towards
Yeah,
in our
I'd
organization.
agree. I'm not gonna dive too deep on the clinical side of the house, but I agree with you. I think there's this absolutely you said it very well.
Yeah. I'll just make this comment. Most of the people I've had on this podcast have had a strong clinical bent. And I think your business perspective has been a lot of fun to get into, and your perspectives out here. So this has been good. I'm glad we had a chance to get this
Oh,
together.
absolutely.
So I'm going to
Long
close
time
out.
coming.
So I'm going to close out here
Yep.
with some, potentially quick questions. Okay. A trend in rehab that excites you. And you can expand that. You don't have to focus exactly on rehab, but
Yeah, trend in rehab that excites me. I'll go real specific. I'm just really excited about, and this is going to be specific to Ivy, and I know there's other providers out there, but I'm just really super excited about our growing of our pediatric book. I just think that just is, it's tremendous being able to treat kids and get them where they need to be is a gift. And I just love being a part of it and carrying on that conversation with the health plans. And don't get me wrong, our entire book is tremendously valuable, but at least to me, kids hold a special place in my heart. And I just think it's amazing to watch these therapists, what they do in treating of children and engaging with them, and then communicating so beautifully to the parents. I know it's like when my kids were younger, right? You want to hover, but you also want to step back and make sure that the experts are doing their job. So I'm really jazzed at how we're growing our pediatric book.
wow. What age would you be? Are you talking about middle high school sports, or is that a different
Younger,
spectrum?
younger, younger. Yeah,
Younger. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I'll have
yeah,
offline
yeah.
questions for you on that. That's brilliant. Thanks for bringing that up. A trend that worries you.
A trend that worries me, and I shouldn't say it'll never go away, is it? I feel as much as we all want common agendas, I feel that we all go about it differently, and hey, that's a good thing, I guess, right? I mean, I guess that's a good way we all want to achieve it. But I'll go back to what I said sometime during the conversation. I mean, to me, it comes down to the patient's journey and his or her care to get healthy. And I think sometimes we let other things get in the way of that. And so it just worries me as we continue. That's just one opinion.
Yeah. And thoughtful one at that. This third question is also very specific to you. If you could remix one thing about our industry circumstance today, what would it be? And I guess I'm talking about the rehab industry.
Wow, if I could remix one thing, that's a great question. I would say, but I'm going to pull it on a thread from a little earlier. I think it would be greater, a greater consistent alignment between all providers related to the rehab space.
Yep.
I think consistent, greater collaboration. It's there, but if I could blow it up and do it differently, I would, so that we were all there together in a giant hub with the member in the center, and I'm talking all the time, And then there was collaboration on the orthopedic surgeon, any diagnostic, the primary care, the physical therapy, the urgent care center that they got them through. If they're an athlete, the school, just it's there, but I feel it's somewhat fragmented. And I know that there's probably people listening to this going, no, I got it. It works great. And that's super. I just don't feel it's consistent throughout the states.
That's a brilliant response, Stephen. And thanks for your thoughtful process through that, because I think it aligns totally with what I think, what we at Band Connect think, and that's what we're trying to drive afterwards. It's a sort of a lofty aspirational goal on one level.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it's fully worth it because I think it makes us all accountable, as I like to say. It's a very simplistic term, but it makes us all accountable.
Yeah, I agree.
And towards a common goal, and hopefully that leads to good things. So I think we're bordering towards the end of our time. I have one other question. If there's one piece of advice you would give to the rehab organizations around you, it doesn't have to be Ivy, it could be anybody, looking to drive a more collaborative relationship with payers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's advice other than I feel we're all in this together, and having the open dialogue and conversation on what's needed on both sides of the street, or if there's three parties involved, is really important. And I think sometimes we get very focused on our needs and our wants, and I'm guilty of that. I'm totally guilty of that. But I just think if we've sometimes got to step away and realize that in the end, we all want the same thing, and it's a common theme. I've said it ad nauseum. It's about the patient, and I think we get very myopic in that. We don't worry about that. So I try and challenge myself. I try and challenge others to really focus on that. And sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, and sometimes people tell me I should take my own advice.
Very true. I mean, and this has been hitting me through our conversation, is that you are indeed in a very unique position, given your professional experience and your ability. And I think you've seen all sides of this equation, which is what makes that comment even more valuable, because you've seen all sides of it. You've had at least a partial foot on all sides of it, and makes you think that way. So yes, it's hard to consistently behave that way because we all want to get to where we want to get to, but really appreciate your thought there.
No, I was had to pull on that one.
Stephen, I want to thank you for engaging in this discussion, and more importantly, for all the work that you're doing, for the information that you've shared today. I think it's been great perspectives. You've been listening to Rehab Remix, Reimagining Boundaries, produced by Band Connect. I'm Rohit Nayak, inviting you to join us next time as we continue our journey together in what we like to call our hybrid rehab revolution. Please follow us and subscribe to our Band Connect channel. Stephen, thank you.
Rohit, thank you.